Hello there, folks. My name is Dan Bell, and today's Microsoft project training session is talking about using the multiple timeline functionality that was introduced to Microsoft Project 2016. So as of the 2016 version, there were a number of new and improved features released, and one of them was the Tell Me functionality. It's basically a help feature utilizing a search box on the ribbon. You can use it to quickly find project features or help content about specific features that you want to use. There were also some new themes introduced. You can change the visual style of project by applying one of the many new Office themes. And then, of course, the timeline view updates. And the two significant things there are that you can now have more than one timeline bar, as well as you can have custom date ranges. So no longer does it always have to be the entire date range of the project. Now we can specify that that one timeline may focus on a specific time frame. So great new additions there. So what do we want to use timelines for? Well, they're great for displaying key tasks or milestones, or you maybe have other important items from your project that you'd like to display in some type of vivid and simple form. They're really great for communicating quick summaries of your project, maybe in a PowerPoint presentation or an email or some kind of other communication. You can also add as much or as little detail to the timeline to communicate that important information to your intended audience or the stakeholders for that Microsoft project schedule you have. Now, the timeline is displayed above the current view that you're using, and typically it's part of the view that's displayed by default Microsoft Project 2016, and that would be the Gantt with timeline view. And initially it's going to be empty, regardless of whether your project has any tasks or not. You will need to add the tasks to the timeline view, okay? And as we said before, now project can have multiple timelines. So again, a great new addition to Project 2016 is the ability to have that multiple timeline functionality. These are some of the capabilities. Actually, this is, I believe all of the functionality of the timeline functionality when you have a timeline created within the system. I'm not going to go through all of these right now. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to create a timeline, and then we'll go through all these different functions. Let's get started. Now, I have project launched, Project 2016, and I have a schedule already opened up in place. So the first thing I want to do is I'd like to go through the ways in which you can add tasks to the timeline. Now you see that I do have the Gantt chart with timeline view exposed right here, and you can see the timeline up top with no tasks added to it. How do we add tasks to the timeline? Well, there's multiple ways to do it. Which way you do it, really up to you. Which one you find more convenient for you. You can actually, a couple different ways. So I can go ahead, and right now, what I did is I clicked on the timeline first of all. And when I did that, what it did is it made the format tab active, and it shows me all the functionality that's available with the timeline. One of the functions in the insert group is called existing tasks. And when I click that, it brings up the add to tasks timeline dialog box. And in here, it's going to show me the entire structure of the project, all the different tasks, the summary tasks, and so forth. And each one's going to have a checkbox in front of it. And what I could do, if I really wanted to, is I could actually find the tasks that I want to add, click the checkbox like so, click the OK button, and then those tasks are going to get added to the timeline like so. All right, that's one way. Okay, I'm going to show a couple other ways here. Another way would be to select the rows of the tasks that I want to add, right? You probably know this by now, maybe you know, but one way to select is click in the first row, and you can drag. So click, hold, drag like that. And that will select all the rows that I want. So basically what I wanted to do is select all my level 1 tasks. And what I can do here is now I can go to my task ribbon, and then within the properties group, there's an add to timeline button. Click that. That adds all those tasks to the timeline really easily, right? That's another way to do it. Now notice there's a really quick way to remove tasks from the timeline. All I have to do is click that add to timeline button again, right? So that's going to remove them all. Okay, so I can add remove, right? If I only want to remove a couple, select a couple, click that button, it's going to remove a couple. Or I can select them like so, delete button gets rid of them. Let's try another method. Again, I can select all the tasks I want to add. Now I'm going to click on the first row, hold the shift key, and then click on the last row. Then you can right click, and from the submenu toward the bottom, there's an add to timeline selection. I can click that, and it adds all these tasks to the timeline. There you go. There are the different ways to add them. Showed you a couple ways to remove them as well. The same thing here, right? I can right click on one of these rows, brings up the sub menu, and I can, again, click that add to timeline link. It'll go ahead and remove them. Now, let's go ahead and get started and actually create a timeline. So first I'm going to go ahead and add all my tasks here. Now, with them added, let's talk about some of these functions at the format ribbon. Now notice the first one is date range. So let's say, for instance, that right now the entire project timeline is being displayed from the very beginning of the project, the start date, right through the actual finish of 5/27. Maybe I don't want to display the entire time frame in the timeline. I'm creating a timeline. Somebody asked me, hey, Dan, can you create a timeline? Show me general conditions, site work, those particular parts of the project. Maybe include foundation as well. Okay, well, how do I do that? Well, actually, let's go ahead. We'll put focus back in the timeline. Makes the options available. Click on date range. Now, what do I want to do? I want to select the beginning of the project. It's 10/26, right? So we'll go ahead and select 10/26. And then I want to get through, and it looks like the end of January, right? So let's select the end of January here. Select the 31st. Click OK. And there's my timeline focusing on just that particular time frame, right? Again, it's a great way to focus on just that particular time period that you want to focus on. I'm doing it on one timeline here. If I had multiple displayed, I could focus on just a particular area in one timeline and have the whole project in another, right? So I have my options here. One of the other options, and let's go ahead and let's bring the whole project timeline back in. One of the other options is date format. Notice in the boxes we have dates here. It shows the first 3 letters of the day, and then it shows the date in a short format. You have the option to specify many different ways to display the date, right? I could show the entire month here. However, notice what it does. It takes up a lot more of your real estate in these boxes, right? Therefore, you do want to consider how you display the date, right? You might want to keep it short, such that you will be able to see the entire task name and you don't have the words wrapping and making it a little more convoluted, a little more difficult to read, right? That is the date format functionality. The detailed timeline button, the next one, what does that do? Well, actually it removes everything from within the boxes. Therefore, if I want to completely clean and all I want to see are maybe like a Gantt chart representation, right? It's almost like a Gantt chart here. Just want to see the colored bars that represent the timeline items that I selected. That's really what the detailed timeline button does, is it removes all the detail from within those boxes. Okay. Overlap tasks. We have overlap tasks in our project. That regularly happens when there are tasks occurring at the same time. In a timeline, what that does is it displays them on different rows, makes them easy to read. If you don't want them displayed on different rows, deselect overlap tasks, right? So now they're displayed on one row. Definitely makes it a little more difficult to read here. And therefore, again, depending on your particular circumstances, may be better to have them displayed on multiple rows. The next one, pan and zoom. What does that do? Well, before I deselect it, let me show you this. Notice how when I kind of pan here, right? Move this around, you can notice those bars up top. See how they're kind of interconnected, the timeline with the Gantt chart? Well, if you don't want that behavior, all right, you can actually deselect the pan and zoom. And now when I manipulate my Gantt chart, there's no relationship between what I'm doing up top and what I'm doing down below. All right. Okay, it can make it a little more convenient sometimes when you have you want to zoom in on the Gantt chart, but not necessarily on the timeline, vice versa, and have them not interact with each other. That can be very helpful. Okay. These next items, timeline bar, insert a timeline bar. Pretty self-explanatory. If I want to have another timeline bar to be able to add items to, I click Insert Timeline Bar. Existing tasks, that brought up that dialog box that we showed you earlier, right? So we know what that is. And then these other items here, these basically will allow us to insert a new task into the project and insert a new bar into the timeline at the same time, or insert a new task into the project and make it show as a call out task, and I'll tell you what a call out is in a minute, or insert a new milestone into the project and then insert it into the timeline bar. To be perfectly honest, you're probably not going to use these that often. Maybe if you're just kind of coming up with an ad hoc timeline for somebody. For the most part, though, you're probably going to be creating your tasks in your work breakdown structure or down here first, then adding them to the timeline up above. Okay. All right. Let's look at these next items. We're almost done going through there, and then we're going to manipulate our timeline. Display as bar. Well, right now, you notice these all look like graphical bars, okay? That's what they are. If we want to display them differently, these two items right next door to each other, display as bar and display as callout, they allow us to display these items different within our timeline. So displaying as a callout will allow us to, instead of displaying it like a bar, it'll put it above the timeline, it'll put the name of it, and then it'll put the duration here represented by a line, okay? Those can be very, very helpful. For instance, let's say, for instance, I would like to have project summary task. It's always good to have the project summary task because you can see the entire duration of the project. I can see it here, but sometimes it's helpful to have it in the timeline as we do in the project down below in the Gantt chart. I can right-click here, add this to the timeline. Notice that it added a bar representing the project summary task here at the top of the project. I really don't want to represent it like that. Why don't I display it as a call out? Now I can click the call out button here, or I can right click on it and select display as call out here as well. Okay. Therefore, now I have a project summary item in the timeline. You can see the entire duration represented here, and it has the title of the project at the very top of my timeline. I personally find that helpful, so I'm going to leave that in. And then, of course, we have these other items here, remove from timeline. That's basically just going to remove whatever I happen to have selected from the timeline. Okay. Last item here, copy timeline. If you would like to copy this, paste it into an email, a presentation, or copy it full size and just paste it exactly how it looks into something, you can utilize this functionality. If you have a software that you use like Snagit, that you copy screen prints, you can use that as well. I use Snagit all the time. I find that to be pretty beneficial, to be honest. You can use that too, right? So whatever works for you, you can go ahead and use. Let's go ahead and finish formatting this. We went through and we added the original task there. We went through the functions here. What I'd like to do is I'm going to make some modifications to this timeline. Hypothetically, somebody asks me for a timeline for this project. They want an overall representation of the entire project. Then they'd like to see the interior finishes on a separate timeline with the level 2 items underneath it. And we're going to take care of that now. For clarity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change site work to a call out so I can see it just a little bit better. We'll right click on site work, make it a call out. There's site work. And another thing I'd like to do is I'd like to change the height of these bars, make them just a little bit higher, and all I have to do is select one of these bars, any one, it doesn't matter, and here's the text line item, make that a 2, and it's going to make all the items 1 line higher. Give me a little more height here, make it a little more easy to read. That's great, I like that. And now let's go ahead and make these items, change the colors up a little bit, make that guy blue, and we'll just go through these. Not going to get too particular about what colors they are. I'm going to make this one that color, and then we'll go back through these, and we'll make that one dark, and we'll do this one like so. And we're not going to do interior finishes. You'll see why in just a minute. We made that one green, so we're going to go back here. And then final acceptance we'll take care of and make it that. And that, oh, almost, we have to do one more thing. Let's do our text there. All right, there's the coloring for the top bar. Now notice I didn't do anything with interior finishes. That's because part of the requirement here was to actually take interior finishes and provide a little more detail about what's going on with interior finishes. And to do that, I'm going to put that on its own timeline bar, right? I could delete it from here and add it to there. The other thing I can do is I can actually click and drag and move it, right? So I can click it, drag it, and move it just like so. And now it's on the lower timeline bar. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a call out. Okay, because like I said, I'm going to display more detail. And when I do that, I tend to use call outs to represent the high level item and use actual bars to represent the detail. And what I'm going to do is display this in the bottom. So I click and I drag, and now it's on the bottom of the bar. All right, let's go ahead and find its interior finishes. And there's interior finishes down here. What we're going to do is we're going to find the next level items under interior finish, because those are the items I want to add there, and select them as ever you find most convenient to select those items immediately under interior finishes. And again, like we said before, how can I add them? Well, I can right click here. I can go into the properties section, click add to timeline. Multiple ways I can do it, right? So we'll click the add to timeline. There are all the detail items within interior finishes. We wanted to see the exploded, the more detail within interior finishes. That was the requirement of this timeline. Therefore, we took care of that. I'm going to select all these at one time. Yeah, maybe we'll make these all the same color. You know, whatever really suits us here, right? So we can take care of this. Let's go ahead and make that. Be done with it. Okay, there's our interior finishes. And let's see. To make that a different color. There we go. There are our two timeline bars. Okay. I think they're looking pretty good. Now, there's one other thing you can do here that I didn't point out initially. There is the ability to actually label these things if you wanted to label the bars. I don't particularly find that very helpful, to be honest with you. Therefore, I don't really use the labeling that much. All it really does is put a label underneath each one of them here. So I'm going to leave that alone for right this minute, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some snapshots of this. And the requirement is we have to provide these. So like I said, I like to use Snagit. Now, like I said, you can use the for email, the full size, whatever it is that you want. Now, I'm going to demonstrate the for email to you. Again, I'm not a huge fan of these, and you'll see why in just a minute, because it kind of scrunches it all up. Like so, right? Now you do have options to expand them out like so, okay? So you can do that if you want. You get kind of a pretty decent view there. What I really wanted to do in this particular case, however, is I wanted to get a nice view of the top one, right? So I'm just going to take a snap of this one like so, and we'll take it. And this is on my other screen right now, so we're going to just paste this right in that email we just had. Right, so there's the initial one. Okay, and that's basically what we're looking for. And the other thing that I wanted to do was to get a little bit different view of the bottom one. We wanted to do a specific date range, beginning of March. Yeah, it looks like March 24th approximately. Right, so let's focus on the 22nd, and then we're looking at, it looks like May 5th, I think. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on that a little bit and see if we can't get a little better view of that, right? So that's kind of what I was looking for. Sometimes it can be a little difficult to get exactly the zoom you're looking for, because that slider tends to be just a little bit sensitive, right? But ultimately we can get what we want and be done with it. Hey Tom, here are the timelines you requested. Please advise if you have any questions or comments. There it is, and then I would just go ahead and send it to whoever the person is that needs this timeline view, and they can study it. Yeah, the other thing I can do, of course, is if I go back here, right, to my View tab, deselect this, I can, of course, include some kind of screen print of the detail of the project as well, if they require details of the project too. Suffice to say, the goal of this was to actually get a couple of different timelines here to be able to send those, because that was the initial requirement. So there you have it. That is how the timeline functionality works. Hope you learned something from this. If you have any questions or comments, here's the information how to get a hold of us. I was enjoyed being with you folks. If you have any videos you'd like to see in the future, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.